Hi, this is Becky Nunn of Nunn Design, and I'm a guest designer today at the Beadaholique studio. In this video, we're going to be making this great channel bangle using crystal clay, and then using Gilders place to go over the top of it and then seal it. The texture is going to be coming from the rubber stamp. So for this project, you will need the Nunn Design sealant, a paintbrush, a rubber stamp, and in this one I'm using the vine, a little bit of baby powder, some channel bangles, crystal clay, and Gilders paste. It might look like a lot of items, but a lot of these items you can use for many other projects too. You're going to want to follow the manufacturer's instructions on how to handle the clay. But you'll want to put your gloves on first, pinch off equal sized balls. And I did a pretty good size amount because I have to go all the way around, and plus I'm going to do another channel bracelet right behind it, so I have two worth here. So you just take your clay and you're going to mix it together, and I have the black, and black is probably one of the stickier ones that I have experienced, meaning that it sticks to my gloves more so than others. And I think that's because it just takes a lot of pigment to make it that black. So you're going to have 90 to 120 minutes to work with the clay before it starts to get really hard and you won't be able to work with it. So don't feel like you need to rush, because that's quite a bit of time for the project that we're going to be doing. So you'll mix it together until it's no longer marbled, and it should look something like that. Once your clay is fully mixed, you'll be able to take off your gloves and handle the clay. I like to also have a wet wipe right beside me when I'm working at this phase, because I like to make sure that I'm getting the clay off of my fingers, out from underneath my fingernails, and off of the metals when I'm working. So I have a nice round ball, and I'm going to go ahead and start to snake it out approximately 8 inches, but don't worry, because you can continue to make it long as you go along. So I'm just putting the clay down into the channel bangle by pressing down, and I'm moving my finger forward like this to squeeze the clay. I want it to be somewhat raised so it'll take the impression, but I don't want it to be too raised. And I don't want my snake to be too wide, because I'll end up getting clay all over the sides. So you might want to mix a small amount first and just practice this, and then pull it out and clean up your bangle. But if you're feeling confident, I say go for it. Nothing that a little bit of cleanup later can't take care of. So I'm just going to go all the way around the outside edge, pressing it down. And I'm also pulling on my clay a little bit to thin it out if I have a really thick area. See, right here is really thick, so when I get to that, I'll pull it a little bit more. And I'm using my thumb to press in that forward motion. Sometimes if I had a thin patch, and you'll know when you hit a thin patch, you can pull it back even that way. If you had a place that was had more clay or less clay, and it wasn't a nice even dome, you can also go back and pinch off that excess after the fact. So don't worry about it not being perfect. There's always time and ways in which you can go back if you weren't happy with your results the first time. That's one of the things that I love about the techniques that Nunn Design comes up with, is they're very forgiving, and they're made for a person who has absolutely no jewelry skills or a person who has a lot of them. So I got to the end right here, and I'm just going to pinch off my excess, and then I'll blend that together at the end. So now I have the clay all down. See, that's a thin part, so I could add more clay in there, but I just squished it over on the sides. So I'm just making sure that the clay is over to those side edges all the way, flush, just make it look nice and tidy. And then if I have some that's hanging over, I'll pull it in. Then I'm going to use my wet wipe, and I'm just going to come along these edges right here and just make sure that my clay, so my fingernail is kind of a little bit down inside of that inside groove, and I'm using my back fingernail here on the inside, and I'm coming around this side and cleaning up that outside edge. Flip it, and then do the same on this side. There's where my seam is, so I'm patting that down a little bit more. And then I'm going to double check to make sure that, you know, my clay, if I have excess, a lot of it, I might want to pinch some of it out. But that looks pretty good. This is where the rubber stamp comes into play, and my baby powder. I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit of my baby powder that I have on my, and put it on my finger, and then just rub it over on top of the rubber stamp. Or if you have a texturing pad, or it just allows the clay, which is fairly soft, to go over the surface and not stick to the rubber stamp. So I'm just putting a really light coat, and you can pat off the excess onto the rubber stamp. Then I'm going to take my channel, and I'm just going to lightly roll it over. Well, it depends on how hard of an impression you want to make, but I'm going to roll it over. And don't worry if you have that baby powder showing up there, we can wipe that off. And you're just going to keep on going, just continuing to roll it. And when you have that impression inside, you're going to want to make sure that you're not touching that side, because you can press down on that. So I'm actually using my fingers to control it from the inside of the bangle. Can you see that? If it starts to stick a little bit, you want to just take a wet wipe and wipe down your pad a little bit and get that excess clay that might have been coming off onto your rubber stamp. Let that dry. And then take a little bit more of your baby powder and put it onto the surface. Excess off. And you're ready to roll. Bada boom, bada bing. No pun intended. And I'm almost there. And now I have my texture all inside of my bangle. I'm going to go ahead and wipe off any of that baby powder while it's still, you know, slightly wet. And I'm also just kind of making sure that my edges are nice and clean along the sides. And then I'm going to let this sit for about two hours until the clay is really hard inside of the channel bangle before I put on the Gilders paste. So the next step is going to be applying the Gilders paste to the pattern that we've rolled over and embedded in. So open up your Gilders paste. I'm using the Inca Gold, and I took my wet wipe and just rolled it and got it a little bit wet right there using the wet wipe and my finger. And then you just slightly brush it onto your piece. And you can see that I'm just going over lightly the surface area, so it's leaving the recessed areas still down inside of there, black. Isn't that cool? And then depending on the kind of look that you want, you can rub away more of it and have it just be a really light look, or you can put a lot of it on there and have it be a really gold look. I'm even thinking about those little side edges right there. And that's how you do that. The last step is going to be using the Nunn Design Sealant. This just creates a nice varnish that goes over the top and protects the piece, that Gilders paste. So just go ahead and dip your brush into the sealant and then paint a light coat over the top of your channel bangle. I let my piece dry, following the manufacturer's instructions. And this will just give it a sheen, not too glossy like resin would give us, but just a nice sheen over the top of it. So this is the part of the video where I bring to you the Becky Nunn Dog and Pony Show. Although this looks kind of like more like a garage sale or an estate sale, but that's cool too. So this is the piece that we just showed the example of making something similar to this, where we texturized and then we put a little bit of Gilders paste over. In this one it was a copper Gilders paste on a copper bangle, and then has the sealant over it. And to watch other videos on how to embed crystal clay, look up crystal clay videos on Beadaholique. This over here is using the same technique with white crystal clay and the sealant, and then using cording to make a macrame finish. This doesn't have any of the Gilders paste on it, just the white crystal clay. This one has the sealant, and this one has no sealant at all and just has that more of a matte finish. So you can see the differences of what that looks like. This piece was texturized. It's a brown crystal clay, and then embedded a couple of the bead caps inside the ring to make a fun ring. On this one, I used the crystal clay around the outside edge of a piece of glass with the image in it. I texturized it and then let it sit, and then painted. I used the Gilder paste over the top of that. Here's some samples of texturizing and then using paint. And here's an example of texturizing by rubber stamping direct onto the crystal clay. First putting the white down, putting some mica powder, and then using a black StazOn ink and rubber stamping right onto the piece. So I hope I've been successful in inspiring and nurturing your creativity and teaching you fun ways to use epoxy clays, crystal clay, and texturizing.